hands at his feet.
Welcome to the teaching ministry of Calvary Chapel Corinth with Senior Pastor Charlie Villard. We're an expositional teaching church with a mission to comfort those in any affliction with the comfort in which we ourselves have been comforted by God. We're glad to have you join us today, so let's open up our Bibles and begin our verse-by-verse study in God's Word.
All right, so this letter, we wrapped up chapter 3 last week, and there's no real chapters in these letters. It was just one big letter. So I want to just jump back a few verses. We were talking about Christ's suffering, and in chapter 3, verse 21, starting there, it says, "There also is an antitype which now saves us, baptism, not the removal of filth from the flesh, but the answer of good conscience toward God through the resurrection of Jesus Christ, who has gone into heaven and is at the right hand of God, angels and authorities and powers having been made subject to him." So, really, Peter could leave this letter and be done. He said, Christ did everything for you. It's completed. He went to the right hand of the Father. So he ascended back to heaven. He sits there until an appointed time where he'll return. Everything has been given to him. All authorities, angels, powers. To me, when I read that, it's really all we need to know, right? When I go out into life, if I thought on just that one particular verse, I have everything I need. He's going to continue on, and Paul and Peter is going to explain to us, though God is there, what's happening to us is purposeful. So if we remember at the end of the week, end of the day, end of the week, in my head I was thinking, I looked down, I got this thing on my wrist, what they call it? Ganglion. I'm having a drain Thursday. End of next week, I was going to say, like, hey, can you pray for me the end of next week? Because they're going to drain this thing and hopefully it'll go away. And the doctor literally said that. So I tried it, and apparently I can't hit myself hard enough. Well, so Sheena can't do it because she'll hit multiple times just in case, and I really don't trust anyone else. Yeah, he said, look, you can do that, but sometimes it smashes it, and then this tissue goes in other places and grows. He's like, so we'll drain it out. Now, he actually said that too. He's like, yeah, that old adage, you hit it with the Bible. I was like, well, I tried, and it hurt, but it didn't do anything. And so I'm thinking, I don't hit it hard enough. So, if you guys want to line up at the end of this, you can take turns, just come by and hit it. I'm going to find a small Bible, though. Like one of those daily breads. Hit it with a daily bread. So what is this, unholy? It's the devil's work right there. It sounds evil. Oh, I like that one. Back then, everyone did have a Bible, probably. Now they'd be like, well, can I hit it with my iPhone 12? We're in 15 anyway now. Just hit it with your iPhone. So I messed that up. At the end of the day, right, we know Christ is on the throne, and that's where we should live, that he has all the authority and power, even over the enemy, even over everything that happens in our lives. If he's not stopping some suffering that Peter is going to start talking about, that there's a purpose for it. You would pray for me, though. I don't mind needles and all that stuff. I just want to go back to work, so we opted to have it drained rather than having a cutout, because that leaves a scar, and it's not even really that big of a deal, apart from it's ugly when I look at it, but my mouse movements on a computer all day long, it actually starts to pinch my finger nerves, so it's getting annoying. And I have to see an ENT because my septum did deviate a little, and it's probably fine. Just pray for me that I don't get... It has been a rough couple of weeks. I don't know if you guys have these weeks where literally everything you do, it doesn't go wrong, it just goes terribly wrong. Like I walk by my desk at work and my shorts catch on the drawer and rip the desk drawer out and I get knocked back. And I'm like, can I just walk by? I walk by this desk 1,000 times a day and I can't seem to get out of my own way. Or mowing the lawn, you're just cruising along, trying to mow. It's 950 degrees, it's humid. I got 20 minutes before it's pitch black and the blade just drops off into the grass. And I'm like, it has been like 2 weeks of this where I just go, could anything else go wrong? literally anything else, because I'd rather just get it all out of the way right now. And I don't always have the best attitude with that stuff, as Sheena can probably attest. I will say I didn't swear. I haven't punched anything, so I have to be making some progress. I think I threw a screwdriver when I was out in the yard, but I didn't mean like mad. I was just more like, I'm done, move along. Normally I would flip out, and it has just been a long couple of weeks of that, and I cannot seem to, at work I don't make progress. You work 14, 15 hours on something, and you go, I'm no further than I was 15 hours ago. I don't understand how that's possible. I've just wasted my life. Nothing is a waste in God's kingdom. It always pans out, and I don't totally believe that, but hopefully you believe me when I say it. Verse 1 in chapter 4. So, knowing Christ is sitting on the throne, he says, therefore, but he doesn't say but, right? He's not negating anything that he just said. Therefore, since Christ suffered for us in the flesh, arm yourselves also with that same mind, for he who suffered in the flesh has ceased from sin, that he no longer should live the rest of his time in the flesh for the lusts of men, but for the will of God. Let's continue on. For we have spent enough of our past lifetime in doing the will of the Gentiles. It's a nice way of saying that. But he says, what? When we walked in lewdness, lusts, drunkenness, revelries, drinking parties, and abominable idolatries. In regard to these, they think it strange that you do not run with them in the same flood of dissipation, speaking evil of you. They will give an account to him who is ready to judge the living and the dead. For this reason, the gospel is also preached to those who are dead, that they might be judged according to men in the flesh, but live according to God in the spirit. So he says, but is a negatory type thing, right? So if you say something and then you say but, and whatever you go on with after means that whatever you said previous to the word but doesn't really matter. You're like, I'm sorry, but I did that because, which basically means you're not sorry, and you're explaining why you did that and why you're justified. So when your kid's like, you're like, hey, look, you need to apologize, hurt my feelings. Well, I'm sorry, but you were mean. Okay, so you're excusing and saying, I want to return harsh feelings because you think I was mean, so you're going to be mean. It's not the way to be. And there's a couple of times in the Bible, most people will quote two words, right? But God. Because basically means anything that happens to us, but God, great in mercy, God loving, all of those things pale in comparison to who God is. So he doesn't say, yes, Christ sits on the throne, but he says, therefore, since Christ, so he's giving an example of how we're to be. Since Christ suffered for us in the flesh, he says, arm yourselves also with that same mind. Know when you leave and you go out away, into the world, or as soon as you open your eyes laying in bed, that Christ suffered for us in the flesh. We should know that he also is in heaven, on the throne, and in control. Never believe the lie that everything is out of control, even in the midst of all of the chaos. And he says, for he who suffered in the flesh has ceased from sin, that he no longer should live the rest of his time in the flesh for the lusts of men. Why did he suffer? So that we do not have to live our lives chasing after lusts of the flesh. Things that we want. Things that the world tells us we're supposed to have. Apple's greatest marketing scheme ever. You need this in your life. It's literally their tactic. Why do I need a brand new phone? Because it has this feature and you need this. You need a bigger, higher res camera. No, you really don't, honestly. We're getting to the point where you can see everything. When I do the daily devotions, I'm trying to sit back far enough so you can't see all the imperfections. This is a total imperfection anyway, but it's what happens. People were all upset when HD started because in movies, makeup can't hide everything. But when you're watching a non-HD picture, you don't really see everything. It's like a blur. Now we're getting to the point where we're watching, 4K and 8K shows. Everything has to be perfect. That's what we fall into, this trap that we must be perfect. But we're not going to be, as we're going to suffer in the flesh. He says, but for the will of God, right? The will of God. God's not permissive will, his divine will. That we will suffer in this world, but we will see how to say this. That we will suffer, but that we will see God's divine plan in it. We won't murmur at him. We won't complain. We'll go about our way, even in this suffering, knowing there's a purpose. That's God's will, right? That's a will of God, the will of God. For we have spent enough of our past lifetime in doing the will of the Gentiles. Man, what a cool, nice way of saying we have just lived like heathens, right? That's what the King James would say, heathens. We live like the world. We do like the world. We live in such a messy state that we have lived our lives long enough in that. Why are we spending our Christian life living like that too? We don't need to live like that anymore. We can choose not to live that way. It says, when we walked in lewdness. It's a cool word. Man, you don't see that one on the news anymore. They were just running around in lewdness. It's basically like doing embarrassing things, right? Something that just contradicts what's a good word. Conservative, I guess. People like running around in the street naked, right? A guy gets wasted running around the street naked and they catch it on the news. They would call it lewd behavior. It's just doing things that are so counterculture or counter what's good and what's right? What should be seen as morally conservative, lewdness, just doing ridiculous things, lusts, right? Lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, pride of life, 3 types of sin. Everything falls under one of those. The lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh. He's referring to these cravings our flesh has to do things that we give into. We've spent a long time living in these ways. And he says walking in lewdness, right? We've walked in it. You would be like, well, I've never done any of those things. But if you were to look at our life, we have. We've done things just to spite people. We've done things to make a statement. That would be considered lewd. We've ran after the lusts of flesh, the lust of our eyes, giving in to anything we could do. Drunkenness, he says. Revelries, drinking parties. I like that one. That was an interesting one he picks out. Drinking parties, right? Places we just go and just get wasted. Lewd acts tend to come out of those things, or college parties, right? But that's the kind of things he's referring to. And he says abominable idolatries. We don't have to live this way anymore based on the work that Christ has done. And he says in regard to these, they think it's strange, they, the world, they think it's strange that you do not run with them in the same flood of dissipation, speaking evil of you. When we get saved, our life starts to change. And if we're, really saved, right? We're going, oh man, I'm a mess and God saved me and I want to read his word. And you start to go like, oh man, I shouldn't do that stuff anymore. I'm not going to do that. One of them that was big for me was drinking at work. It's not something that most people do, right? And getting wasted at work is a terrible thing. You shouldn't even be drunk. Most places you can't drink because you can't operate equipment or whatever. But out in California, you work on computers all day. It's actually like a common thing, was generally Thirsty Thursday. Thursday at around 4 o'clock, we would meet in a cube where there was basically a bar. Up in our cube cupboard, you'd open it up and there's bottles of alcohol. We'd mix drinks and there's a fridge. And, we'd sit around as a group and talk about what's going on for the week or some things about life. And it wasn't like a party, right? No one's going crazy, but other people from groups would come over and hang out. And the idea is like going out after work for happy hour, but we don't leave work because we're all busy and we go back to work. I really wasn't a huge drinker when it came to hard alcohol. I'm a Scotch whiskey guy, I guess, if you were to do that. And that's not, I guess you either sip it or I hammer bottles at a time. And so you don't do that at work because that will get you fired. But, it's like, I go hang out with these people and sit with them and they would have beer sometimes, and have a beer. I stopped doing that really early on. It's like, oh, it probably doesn't really look great. Maybe it's fine because that's what the culture does, but I don't really think I should be doing that, and then going back to work. So I'm going to stop doing that. And, people are like, oh, you want a beer? And you're naturally going to go, yeah, no, thanks. I'm just going to hang out. Like, oh, you driving? Well, yeah, later, but I'm good. Thanks. Right. And then you have conversations about what'd you do for the weekend? Oh, I went to church on Sunday because I'm a guy that says I go to church and do these things. Right. My life is changing. And for the first time I'm boldly talking about the things that are happening. And they go, well, you're too good to sit and have a drink with us now? Like, no, I'm not too good. I'm sitting here with you, right? I got my water. I'm going to hang out, or I got a root beer, something. But then you hear whispers like, oh man, he's going to church now. He's going to change, right? And things did change. My views changed, or my real conservative views that I already had started to come out, and people go, well, things are different. And they talk about you, right? You're not giving in the way that they're giving in, which is a conviction, right? Because what you're saying is, I'm not doing that because I'm not sure that it's right, which makes them question what's right and what's wrong. Well, they want to keep doing what they're doing, so then they figure out a way that you're wrong and that your view is wrong. Well, everyone is doing it. That doesn't make it right, right? Just because something legal doesn't make it right. Right and wrong is a moral thing, not a legal thing. Is it morally right or morally wrong for me to do this? And people go, wow, who comes up with morals anyway? I know you would say that because you go by what's legal. If I can make pot legal, then it's right. Nope, I don't think it's right at all still. Doesn't matter if it's legal or not. Morally, I think you should stay off of that stuff and keep sober-minded and keep focused on the things you have in life. You have too much to lose in the case of getting in trouble, right? Drinking is the same way, drugs. But they'll talk about you because you're not as excited to do those things as they are. That's okay. It says they will give an account to him who is ready to judge the living and the dead. For this reason, the gospel was preached also to those who were dead. Like, why preach the gospel to a group of dead people? People that can't hear it. I don't really know. I mean, you never know when someone's going to be changed, right? You never know what's going to happen. You don't know the example you might be leading. And as well, everyone needs to hear the story of Christ. That they might be judged according to the men in the flesh, but live according to God in the Spirit. But at the end of all, when the end of all things is at hand, therefore be serious and watchful in your prayers. What's assumed here? That you're praying. And that can be real hard. First, you're really probably not going to know the will of God unless you're praying to know the will of God. You could probably figure it out, right? You got 4 paths and you run down 3 of them and they're terrible. And then you're like, well, this is probably God's will, this path, because clearly the other 3 didn't really work. And you go down it and you go, oh yeah, that's where God wanted me from the beginning. But what do you learn from that? To still try all the paths the next time? Or do you go, hey, there's 3 more. Let me stop and pray. God, where do you want me to go? He assumes you're already praying. And he says, be serious in your prayer and watchful. Still makes me think of, like moms and grandmoms that pray, like prayer groups. Like, pray for Bill. He's sleeping with that woman down the street and blah, blah, blah. And his kid's doing it. She's like, not just like pray for Bill. He's messed up. Right? Tell the whole story for everyone to hear. It's like gossip group through prayer. He says, be serious. Be watchful in your prayers. Earnestly seek God. And above all things, have fervent love for one another, for love will cover a multitude of sins. Fervent love. Not just, hey guys, how you doing? Love you. Come and hang out with you. Be fervent, right? It's God's job to chase people. But he uses us too, right? You haven't seen somebody for a while, you reach out, tell them that you love them, right? I miss you, love you. Hope everything's okay. I think there's a certain aspect where, you can't go drag a person with you. They live in my home, and you go into church. That's the way it works. It's part of living here. And that's the way it's always been for us, Sheena and I. What you do while you're there, how you participate, and what you do with what God has for you, that's up to you. But while we go, you go. We had this argument with the department every time they came to the house. 2 things that the state would always have a question on. Not one time, every time. They come to your house and they go, do you have weapons? I'm like, yes, we have this conversation every time you come. Are they locked separately from your ammo? And the first couple times was like, no, that's stupid. Why would I do that? But someone going to rob the house and be like, hang on, let me run downstairs real quick, load the gun, come back, and then we can continue from here. So you'd have to get to the point where you'd go, yep. And they go, can you see that? Yep, sure. Because before they came, I'd unload them, separate them out, put them down, and they'd leave. I'd go put them back the way they were supposed to be. And the second thing they would say, you going to church? Yes, I'm not ever not going to church. Do you make Maddie go to church? Your question's a bit weird. Does Maddie need to go with us? Yes. Well, you can't force her to participate. I'm like, well, that's not the question that you're asking. Yes, she goes with us because she's 10 years old or 11 years old. She's not staying home alone. That's not how it works. But she shouldn't be made to go to church. And I'm like, so what's the alternative? Well, one of you would stay home with her. Not happening in my house. We both go to church, and Maddie goes with us. Do I force Maddie to participate in church? No. She has to figure that part out on her own. But does she go and does she sit there? Yes. She's welcome to go to kids' church, which is where she should be. She's welcome to go to multiple services. And they're like, well, and I'm like, is it a legal thing, right? Is it illegal for me to take her? No. Then we should just stop having this conversation because she's going. Well, I'll ask Maddie later if she wants to go. You should do that. But she's still going with us, right? That's the way it works, right? There are things that we say, look, in our home, this is what you do. You take care and you love people. You don't backtalk. You help out around the house because there are things you can be doing. Obviously, if you're 2 years old, you just pick up your room or do something, right? You can't do much. But you love one another while you're doing it. And don't get me wrong. It's not like we wake up and I love you. How are you? It's such a good morning. What's your breakfast and all, right? Most of the time we get up because we've had a blowout the night before. It's like I'm walking to the fridge, I'm getting water, I'm drinking water. Maddie's sitting there. I'm not saying a word. She's not saying a word. You got to go to school. I know. Okay, well, you're not watching the clock. You're going to miss the bus, and then you're going to have to walk. It wasn't all these lovingly awesome conversations, and I wish that it was. I really do. I woke up every morning going, man, don't carry on yesterday's stuff. It's a new day. It's not how God looks at it. And then you walk out, and there's just some strive for attention. You're like, I'm trying, Lord. I'm trying. How do I do this? Right? It's just how it is. But he says, if we have fervent love for another, love will cover a multitude of sins. Love will cover a multitude of sins when someone else loves you because of your sin. Right? That's how we apply that one. I don't want to love and cover your sins because they're gross and ugly. And it's like, well, they're the same as your sins. Yes, but they look grosser on you than they do on me. It's easy to want that loving and covering when you've been the one to do the sin. It's harder when someone else has done it because you're like, look, if I just keep doing that, you're never going to learn. Peter exhorts us here to still keep doing it. He says in 9, be hospitable to one another. Without what? Is everyone in a New King James or anybody in anything something different? Okay, so it's grumbling, right? Murmuring, grumbling. Love them and don't grumble. I'm already failing. I think I probably just grumbled just a minute ago. But this is what we're called to, right? Be hospitable to one another without grumbling. Do things for each other. What's the hospitality? And hospitality, is that the right word? Hospitality? Seems like there's an R. It should be an R in there. Hospitality. Hospitality industry is what? You go stay at a hotel. They have maid service that pick up your room and give you new towels. There's somebody for you to call, a concierge. It's like I just look for front desk on the phone because the concierge part is like, it's not a 5-star hotel. It's just like a motel. I just need to zero and call the person like, hey, my TV's broke. But the hospitality industry is service, right? You're serving the people. And that's really what we're called to do. Serve one another without grumbling. As grudging, ooh, that's a good one.
Which is a little more, to me, different than grumbling. Grumbling is like surface and grudging is like...
Yeah, because, it is an interesting point because like when someone says like don't hold a grudge, you're counting what's happening, right? That's actually a great point. Because you're right, grumbling you could just say and move on, but a grudge is like something you hold inside like, I've served you for 42 years. You do nothing for me. It's like, whoa. Paul said in Corinthians, right, don't keep an account of those things. Well, yeah, but I'm trying not to, but you just make it hard. So you're right? Serving other people without saying, but when are you going to serve me? God doesn't say that, right? The Lord Jesus said, I didn't come to be served, but to serve. That's part of a grudging. Man, that is a good one. I should have looked that one up. Grudging. Don't be grudging when you do it. As each one of you has received a gift, minister it to one another, as good stewards of the manifold grace of God. We all have a gift. We all given. I've always sort of read it this way, right? When you get saved, God cleans up something instantaneously, and he gives you a gift. Other gifts can be given, right? And they can be grown, but he does those things. It's like he takes something and he replaces it with a gift. Mine was anger. It's like I got saved and instantaneously there's almost like a grudge, right? There was this pit that all of a sudden disappeared. It was just like, whoa, this is what it's like to live life without this? Like, why would I ever want to be back in it? To the point where I would separate myself from people who are angry. Because it's like, it's too easy for me to fall back into that. I can't even hear their complaints in their anger. I can't even see people wigging out and like getting all mad. It actually bothers me. It's like I need to move away from that. I don't know what he gave me for a gift. I still don't know that one. But he says here, as each one has received a gift, has been given it to you, you have received it, minister it to one another. Use your gift and be good stewards in the grace of God, the manifold grace of God, the manifested grace. Well, we are to be graceful people. In 11, if anyone speaks, let him speak as the oracles of God. That's a weighty passage. Right? Oracles speak things like prophecy and life and the word, right? Not the lady at Old Orchard Beach telling you your life paths by your hand, right? That's a phony thing. Speaking life into people and truth. And in that, we'll have to eventually speak things people don't want to hear. But we speak them in a graceful way. Like, it's not always about words. Sometimes it's just about attitude. Right? Being graceful as and loving and giving to a person, even as we're telling them the things they don't really want to hear. And that's difficult. Some people, that's their gift. Telling people things that they don't want to hear. You ever met one of those people? It's like, why is it you always seem to tell me the worst things? Do you have anything else to say? I'm not sure that they're doing that's their gift, but let us speak as the oracles of God. If anyone ministers, if anyone, it's not just my job. People go, well, it's your job. You're the pastor, so you should go tell that person they should stop doing that. No, you should do that too, right? It's not just my job. We're all called to be ministers of the gospel. If anyone ministers, let him do it with the ability which God supplies, that in all things God may be glorified through Jesus Christ, to whom belong the glory and the dominion forever and ever. Amen. So how do we speak? With the grace of God. Sometimes you have these conversations with people, right? And you're like, man, I need to say this. And it can be hard, right? You can go over and over in your head, and you're like, I'm going to say it like this, and you might even say it out loud a couple times. I don't know if you've ever recorded yourself, like saying something to hear it, and be like, does this even sound, does it sound bad? Because I've had people say, like, man, you said that so harshly. Man, I said it 50 times, and I recorded it and listened to it, and I said it the exact same way, right? I mean, in my head, it's the exact same way. Sometimes people just hear it harshly, right? Your approach should be as loving as possible, but you can't control what they hear and how they react to it. What you can control is like, Lord, fill me with your Spirit. Help me to say this in the most loving way that I can so that they understand it. And then I also add, but also, hey, maybe that's my problem. I said, but also. So I negated all the love. But it's like, but also be serious enough you understand the gravity of why I have to say it. Speaking to people at church, like serving as an elder, not fun. Like, not fun at all. And I tend to wait a long while before doing it, like really wait. And sometimes this works to your detriment because sometimes I wait to the point where I'm really irritated, and then that's probably why it comes out so harshly. Instead of just going, hey, look, noticing this, and this is a problem we had. One time, was a lady, and she was, how do I say this? Not totally there mentally, right? Older, but you could tell there was probably something. I don't know. You see people when you see them regularly and you're like, they don't catch all the social cues. She would talk to Ken during the teaching. And he kind of ignored it, and then at one point he sort of addressed it, and she kind of chuckled. But it kept going on, and this was like, it went on for like a week or two, different services. And she was talking and talking. Sometimes it's hard. He gets to his low point of his voice. It can be hard to hear him sometimes, even though the mic's loud, right? But I can see people are starting to stir, and she's sitting in the same vicinity, and one of the elders is sitting across, and I'm like looking over at him. He's looking at me, and it's like, we probably should say something at some point here. And it goes on, and so after the service, he's like, okay, we got to say something. And I think he's probably really irritated, and I'm sort of mild, but I'm going, all right, let's go together, and we'll have this conversation. So, we go, we ask her to talk to her for a minute. We pull her aside, and we just like, hey, I don't think you're intentionally trying to distract anyone, but talking during the service can be a distraction to others around you, and the Bible calls us to make sure that we're paying attention and that we're not interrupting God, right? Ken is not God. Ken is the representative while reading the word of God's message to people, and we want to kind of distract from that. She's like, oh, I'm really sorry, and it's like, oh man, this is gonna go great, right? She's sorry, and it's like, look, no problem. We wanted to just tell you now, and she's like, I'm so embarrassed. Like, don't be embarrassed. This is it's okay, And she's like, okay, I appreciate you. Thanks for saying it. Sometimes I just kind of get stuck in my own head, and I start having conversations, and don't realize they're always out loud, And we laughed, and just said, hey, no, look, we want you here. We just want to make sure that everybody gets a distraction-free, teaching. And so she walks away, and she seems to go off and talk to other people, and we're standing there talking. This lady comes over. She's like, don't you dare correct that lady. And I was like, I know what she said, but I'm going to say what to give me a minute, which if you watch, often I do this. I'll go, huh? And make you say it again. One, if you want to correct what you said the first time, giving you an opportunity to correct it, because I did hear it. And two, it gives me another split second to go, how do I react to this, Lord? I don't want to, her reaction, my reaction to be like hers. And I was like, huh? She's like, don't you dare correct that lady, that poor old lady. And we're like, oh, she's fine. We needed to have a conversation. She's like, look, she doesn't probably know all of that, what's going on. And I'm like, no, she did. She received that well. It is, as elders of the church and people serving here, she can't be a distraction to others. And, she's want her to be here, want her to sit, and this lady is now fuming. She's like, you're just taking advantage of people that aren't totally aware. I'm like, no. Look, if you want to have this conversation with Pastor Ken, we can, but it's going to be the same, right? Because he sent us to do these things. And she's like, well, I don't agree with it at all, and maybe I'll stop. I've been coming here for years, and now maybe I'll stop. I'm like, look, I can't stop you from doing that. I certainly hope you'd pray over that. We want you here. We want everyone here. But there is a certain manner of conduct that we should do, right? And I left bummed out going, man, I did that as best I could, Lord. What was I supposed to do? And it was like, he goes, just leave it alone. It's fine, right? Nothing you would have done was going to change that lady. She just didn't like that, that we were correcting her. And, correction comes. But it doesn't have to be an elder, right? You could be somebody sitting in the crowd just being like, hey, I'm trying to listen. Could you, please just keep it down? And I've seen that happen. I've seen it well received, and I've seen other people get irritated and leave. It can be a difficult thing, but we're all called to be ministers to others, right? And we are called to do those things. I'm not going to send one of you to go, yeah, can you go talk to her, right? I'm supposed to do that, but we all can do that, right? We all can have conversations with others, approach it lovingly, be spirit-filled to win the person, right? Not to make them shut up. It's to win them to see what you're saying. That might be distracting to others. Hey, no problem. I've had other conversations go really poorly, but in 12, so he says, beloved, do not think it strange concerning the fiery trial which is to try you, as though some strange thing happened to you. Is that not our attitude? That's mine, right? The mowing the lawn and hit a clump of dirt, which is nothing, and then I drive along and look, and the blade from one of the sides of the deck falls on the ground, and I'm like, what did I do? All I want to do is mow the lawn. I have been serving and doing all kinds of things, and now I'm trying to mow the lawn because in 2 days it'll rain, and it'll be 6 feet long, and then I'll throw a belt because it'll be all messed up, right? And I get on the ground, and I undo the whole deck, and I pull it out, and I look, and I'm like, probably sheared the nut right off of it. I'm going to have to get parts. I'm not going to mow the lawn. I look and I'm like, oh no, the nut came off. Okay, first, that's really concerning that that's the case. 2, that means it's probably somewhere. So I go fishing around and I find it, right? Put it all back together and it's great. I'm like, man, I'm sweating. My eyes are burning from the sweat in my eyes. And I'm just laying on the ground, covered in it. I have my like whiter shorts on. Now they're all gross and dirty. Sheena's going to be like, couldn't you have changed your shorts? It's like, yes, I actually should have, but I don't have any time. I'm running out. I'm ruining everything while I'm doing it. Get it all back together. I start mowing and I'm like, oh, I smell a belt burning. Great. Something's not right again. But pull it out, drop everything again, right? It's like 8:45 at night. It's 90 degrees. In my haste, putting it back together, I got the leveling, the height of the deck. There's a cable, right? I got the cable stuck under the belt, so it was rubbing the whole time. And I'm like, wow, man. I'm glad that I caught that early enough. It was God going, look, if you don't fix that one, you're going to have a bigger problem halfway through your lawn. And so I take it all apart, put it back all together, and I get it all done. I'm driving around in the dark because I have no headlight anymore. I had to replace the engine, the new harness, leaves the light on, kills the battery. And I'm sitting there going, what did I do to get all of this stuff just because I wanted to mow the lawn? Just to keep the lawn looking nice so I don't, my neighbors aren't like, man, those guys, their house, look at that. I did not. Thanks, Doug. Remind me to have a conversation at the end of this. No, maybe it doesn't have, we would have one if it has, so it has like on the spindle a star shape that you put the blade into so it won't move. And then, I noticed that's wearing away. No doubt I'm going to have to replace the spindle. No, probably going to come off eventually. You know what? Good. Because at that point, I'll have had enough. I'm going to drive that tractor right into the pond and I'm going to let it sink. And then I'm going to call my dad, be like, hey, Dad, somehow the tractor got really waterlogged. Any chance you could loan me some money to buy a new tractor? He'll be like, what did you do? Now I'm going to have to go check that. Because that scares me. I mean, the thought is like that it shoots the blade off of it. Thankfully, it just drops straight down. But I could hear it hit the deck. Oh, man. I got to go home and I got to look for that now. Thank you, Doug. And I mean that genuinely because now I'm actually nervous. But rejoice, he says, to the extent that you partake of Christ's sufferings. That's the attitude we should have in that trial. Not, what did I do? Why is this happening? What is the deal? That the enemy would like to use all of these things that I suffer. And God would use it that I understand Christ more and become more like him. I would take his attitude. It says that when his glory is revealed, you may also be glad with exceeding joy. If you have no trials in life and everything works perfect, what's going to happen when the end of the world comes along? Are you going to be excited or bitter? You're going to be bitter. You'll be like, wait, what about all my stuff? What about this? I wasn't ready for that to end. Things have been going fine. These trials make me wake up and go, man, why am I still here? Please, Lord, just take me now. Now is fine. The church will be fine. Frank can teach. Someone else will take over. Sheena will be fine. Trust me, she'll be good without me. Take me now. These trials will make me be exceedingly glad. When I hear that trumpet blast and the Lord returns, I'll be like, finally, it's done. My time is done. Hopefully when I get there, I'll hear good and faithful servant, right? But if life was going so awesome for me and swimmingly and I had everything I wanted, I have no mind for God or the things of God, and I won't be excited when Christ returns. It won't even matter to me. Man, I can't wait till he comes back. if you are reproached for the name of Christ, if you are complaints lodged against you, or people are harsh towards you for the name of Christ, blessed are you, for the Spirit of glory and of God rests upon you. Don't run out and just start yelling the name of Christ and like cutting people off in the road and doing like dumb things, right? But if you're going about your way, living your life for the glory of God, and people are reviling you, reproaching you, complaining against you, he says, you are blessed though. That is a good thing. The Spirit of God is upon you. Is the opposite true? If we look at it from the opposite of this, if no one says anything about me, what is that, right? I mean, that's probably what I'm shooting for, is that people won't say anything about me. But does that mean that maybe I'm not bold enough for Christ? I mean, does that mean I'm not really doing the things? I mean, it doesn't mean I go on Facebook and throw Jesus is Lord in a Facebook status and, or I was going to say something else, but I won't use that one. But I don't know, screw the president and the nation. I was going to do the Brandon one, but that's probably not as funny. That's not really the way to go get attention and then go, whoa, look, you hate me and that's what God's done. It was like, was that God? Is that what he's been calling us to do for the last 10 minutes we've been talking, 15 minutes? No. If you're doing those things and people are taking advantage of it, people are complaining against you, people hate your God because you're doing good and loving things, or you're standing for truth and for what's right. If you're not doing any of those things and no one's saying anything, maybe it's time to just look at man, do I really stand for things? Maybe I'm trying to avoid those complaints. No one likes to be complained about, but he says that the Spirit of glory and of God rests upon you. On their part, he is blasphemed, but on your part, he is glorified. But let none of you suffer as a murderer, a thief, an evildoer, or as a busybody in other people's matters. I love that. We don't use that one very often. You're just a busybody in other people's matters, aren't you? I'm going to start using that. That's awesome. I dig that, actually. It's pretty awesome. What's that mean? You don't mind your own business, or a meddler, right? Getting into stuff that's not for you to get into. I used to do that a lot on Facebook. Someone posts something and then there's when you see there 40, you're seeing 3 out of 45 comments, you're like, oh, this is going to be awesome, right? And you click, see more, and you're like, oh, see more, see more. See more. Wow, there's a lot of these things. I'm like, see all. I want to read the whole chain. And then I'll look for the one, right? And I'll jump right in the middle of it. Like, actually, and go off. And then you wait, right? Like eating popcorn, you're waiting. I wait for the little red one to go. So no, someone liked it. And that's not what I was looking for. I'm looking for an argument in those. I really, really want to argue. But I'll often not do that on my own. I'll post something to just move along. I don't even, if I like the comment, I'll like it. People will argue, and it's that's fine. You can do whatever you want. I don't really care. But it's I just like getting in the middle of other people's situations, apparently. This really classifies me. I'm a busybody in other people's matters. I mean, people don't talk anymore today. So it's the only way to really be a busybody in other people's matters is on social media. Because we don't have conversations anymore, and there's not talk. Well, there's not a lot of talk at my work because I'm usually busy, right? So, actually, that's not true. There's a lot of talk about other people's matters at work. I just try to stay out of it. A busybody in other people's matters. It's interesting, right? But let none of you suffer as a murderer, one of the worst things you can do in society, a thief, probably next to one of the worst things you could do, right? Taking other people's things that are not yours. An evildoer, who even knows what that is. I mean, what's an evildoer? Just walk around, I don't know, throwing goat's blood on people? Or does that really wrap up everything else that's morally wrong? And then he equates a busybody in other people's matters equal to those. Yet if anyone suffers as a Christian, let him not be ashamed, but let him glorify God in this matter. It doesn't mean because we, go along, oh, well, in the name of Christ, I'm going to get into your matters and start talking about that. That's not what he's talking about, right? He's talking about doing things that glorify God, working and doing the will of God, seeking the will of God, knowing it and doing it. In 17, for the time has come for judgment to begin at the house of God. And if it begins with us first, so who's he talking about? The church. The house of God is us. And he's saying, for the time has come for judgment to begin. Now, Peter wrote this some 2,000 years ago at this point. I mean, he was already talking about judgment in the church. God's judgment in the church. And if it begins with us first, what will be the end of those who do not obey the gospel of God? Now, if the righteous one is scarcely saved, where will the ungodly and the sinner appear? So he's saying, look, if God is starting to judge the church and the things that are going on within it, and we're just people, right? I mean, we should be different as a church, but we're not. There's murderers in a church, there's evildoers, there's thieves, there's plenty of busybodies in other people's matters in church, a lot of them actually. Not you guys. You guys really aren't like that. I love this. But I don't get to a bigger church and you'll find all that. And he said that God's judging the church, how they behave, how we conduct ourselves. And we are examples, and God's corrections are for us to be better examples. He says if he's doing that with you, imagine what he thinks of those who don't know any of this. If the righteous one is scarcely saved, what's going to happen to the ungodly and the sinner? It says, therefore, let those who suffer according to the will of God commit their souls to him in doing so as to a faithful creator. We can often really want to save people. A lot of us have a savior complex. Yeah, but if you just do it like this, trust me, this will be fine. Or I can jump in and I can take care of it. This is not that Buddhist belief, right, of don't mess with the homeless person because in a previous life they got messed up badly or they screwed something up, so that's why they're homeless now, and you don't even want to interact with them because you don't want their bad karma to rub off on you. It's not this. This is the most wicked belief, right? We are supposed to help people. We're supposed to minister to them, call them out of the life they live in. But we can't save them from some of the suffering that they're in, nor really should we. What we should see is God's work in their lives trying to teach them something and not step in the way of it. Else, our suffering get all sort of messed up. I got a cool quote we'll end with from Spurgeon on the church. I actually was going to read it like 2-3 weeks ago, and today it seems to be the better place, but he says, let God do his work. We can help people that are hurting, or something, but some of this suffering has to occur because that's how God uses his tool. That's what suffering is, a tool. Paul calls it a manifest token, a gift of God that you suffer. That he loves you so much, he will not just leave you alone. He will not just leave you unchanged, that he will allow suffering to occur, that you might be changed and grow from it. Doesn't feel like a gift. When it comes to the church, Spurgeon said, let not his church tremble. Let her not think of putting out the hand of unbelief to steady the ark of the Lord. Remember what happens when you go to steady the ark? We'll get to it eventually on Thursday nights because in Exodus, but they're carrying the ark, right? The Ark of the Covenant. No one was supposed to touch the Ark of the Covenant except for a set, defined, specific set of people. And they're carrying the ark. They have these big logs that they use, and they go through the bottom of the ark on rings, and they pick it up, and no one touches this thing. This is a holy place, the Holy of Holies where this thing sits. And, they're walking, and it starts to stumble, and a guy reaches out to catch it and instantly dies. God said, do not touch it. He didn't say, do not touch it except for if it's going to stumble. And so it being just and true, what's he have to do, right? The guy's life is done. Do what God says, right? So he says, let not his church tremble, Let her not think of putting out the hand of unbelief to steady the ark of the Lord. The history of the church is to be the history of Christ repeated. To come, to serve, and to suffer, and to die. The history of the church is to be the history of Christ repeated. She is to be betrayed. She is to be scourged. She is to be falsely accused and spitted on. She may have her crucifixion and her death, but, he uses the right, not therefore, but all of that stuff, she shall rise again. Her master rose, and like him, she shall rise and receive glory. You can never kill the church till you can kill Christ, and you can never defeat her till you defeat the Lord Jesus, who already wears the crown of triumph. There's no losing in this game. Whether this little church succeeds or not doesn't really matter, because Christ already won. But why wouldn't it succeed? Someone's going to have to come along and kill the church. But as he said, they'd have to kill the Christ first. The church is a reflection of marriage, which is a reflection of Christ. We're waiting for him to return to come get us and bring us back where we belong as the bride of Christ. It's the church. So no matter what we go through, no matter what's said about us, we'll be spit on, we'll be falsely accused, people will call us a cult. They'll try to stop us, they'll try to harm our name, they'll try to harm people in it. The enemy will come along and try to take you out of here. But he will never win, because the church itself is not about me and you and its success. The church is a representative of Christ, and it will succeed until the day we decide to not follow Christ. Then he'll remove his spirit, and the church will be dead. And we'll try and try and try everything we have with every marketing tactic and every scheme to keep it going. But we'll only be keeping going what is already dead.
Thank you for joining us today. We pray that this teaching has been a blessing to you. If you have any questions or would like to request prayer, you can visit us online at www.cccorinth.org. If you're local, come join us for a service at 125 School Road in Charleston, Maine. We want to remind you that the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty in God. Remain armored up, and until next time, grace and peace.